So welcome to my Capstone professional presentation. This is a culminating presentation from my studies at University of San Diego. And in doing this presentation, I'm going to be sharing with you the project that I did on reading intervention in kindergarten. And one of the things about reading intervention in kindergarten that we are looking at is we're trying to look at the ongoing needs of our students. And this is often quite challenging because we have kids at different levels. Some kids come to us, they haven't even had exposure to reading. Maybe they went to a preschool that didn't introduce anything with reading, and then we have kids who come here that are reading fluently. So we're trying to address all of the needs of all of our students. And one of the things that I also wanted to look at in this project was how to use technology. So I'll be talking a little bit about some of the technology that I think could be useful for our students. One of the things that I did was I used some data that I had with students from this past year to try to look at a needs assessment and see what kind of needs do our kids have when we're coming in, where are they at the beginning of the year, and where are they at the end of the year. And we took a look at some of their reading scores, and we found that some of the kids that came in at the beginning of the year that had very low scores, and they didn't know their letters, they didn't know their sounds, many of them, when they were using some of the technology, they moved along a little quicker. And I'll be talking a little later on about Lexia, one of the programs we use here, one of the programs that is in the curriculum that I put together. So I really was looking at the benefits that kids get from reading intervention and the early identification of kids that are going to need intervention. And self-efficacy was really kind of my overarching goal, that we want kids to be independent, we want them to feel good about reading. And as a kindergarten teacher, it's really a passion of mine. We want them to fall in love with school. And it's really sad sometimes when you see kids who have already given up on reading, and here it is kindergarten, and they've already decided they're not a good reader. So I tried to look at ways that we can use our data and use our technology to help these kids get higher reading scores and to identify right away who's going to need help. So in my rationale, that we've had some challenges. Sometimes we have large classes, we don't always have the staffing that we need to address the reading intervention. And sometimes we've seen that some of our kids, we know at the end of their year they're still struggling, and they're going to go to first grade with reading problems, and they're still going to need intervention. So that was really my rationale for delving into what can we do to identify early on who's going to need reading intervention. And we like for the kids in kindergarten to have mastered their letters and sounds by December. So that's really our goal. And so sometimes we have kids that have already done that, and some kids haven't, so we try to identify them early on. So in the research element of this project, I was looking at how could we use digital curriculum? How could we use online programs? How could we use apps on iPads maybe to help kids who are in need of reading intervention? And how could that also impact their self-efficacy ultimately so they would be doing more things independently? And one of the things that happened as I was kind of doing some of this research is that I started reading a lot of articles about reading intervention. And in reading some of these articles, it became very obvious to me that there are a lot of different opinions about this. And some of the studies that I was looking at, this particular one by Margulis and McCabe talked about that when kids had a higher level of independence or a higher level of confidence, they wanted to work, I mean, it's not a surprise, but they wanted to work harder. So if we can get their confidence strong at a young age, they're going to want to work through those frustrating moments. And the kids who have already been struggling and haven't had as much reading intervention, the study found that they were already setting lower standards for themselves, which I think is pretty alarming, that a very young child already is setting much lower standards for themselves as a reader. In the other article that I read, that this was one of my favorite articles, it really talked about how technology can be associated with independence in kids with reading. And this particular study took a look at a bunch of different programs. One of them was Lexia, but they basically talked about the overall impact of technology. Allows them to work on their own without the teacher having to do it. And one of the great things about the Lexia program is that kids are able to do that once they learn how to work the program. And that certainly there's a strong correlation between independence and improvements in the kids' decoding skills. The third article had to do with special needs students, and this was a great interest to me because we have many special needs students and we want to make sure that their needs are being met in terms of reading. And this particular study really talked about the connection between technology and special needs students, that they were able to work at their own pace and they were able to have a lot more of repetition, a lot more of explicit instruction and embedded feedback. And many of these programs like Lexia keep presenting you with a question. You get it wrong, the question comes up again, and it keeps presenting you information until you start to master that skill. It was an interesting study. And then I also took a look at ABC Mouse, which is another online program that a lot of kids like to do. And in this particular study, the students were working on it at home. And certainly we all know that when kids work on things at home, progress is going to move along a lot quicker. So in this particular study, they found it was very effective for reinforcement with letter sounds and decoding. And it kind of got me thinking about what I can do in the future with my students. Maybe some of my struggling students, I can really talk to those parents about ABC Mouse now that I know a lot more about it. But Lexia certainly is a very effective program in this, and there were a lot of studies that I found that said specifically it improved phonemic awareness. And so those of us that have used it, I think all are in agreement. It can be very effective for reading intervention. So another part of the project was create a curriculum. And so this was actually kind of fun for me because as teachers, we try to use what we already know and we think, what can I use that's effective? So I tried to use what I already know about teaching reading and sounds and the beginning reader and the struggling reader with new information. And so I came up with something called Read to Succeed, where the objectives are basically beginning reading skills, learning names of letters. We get some kids that come in here that don't know names of letters and that struggle just to master those names of letters. And we get kids in here who don't know any sounds at all. So the objectives of my reading curriculum was that they would first learn names of letters, learn sounds, increase their phonemic awareness, and ultimately by the end of the year be able to read at a fluency level that is expected in our district for going into first grade. This is a pretty challenging thing because, as we all know, we have Common Core and everything we do has to be aligned with Common Core. So I tried to identify particular Common Core standards that they address, and here they are. I'm not going to read through all of them, but basically that was the requirement of this curriculum. It had to be completely aligned with Common Core. So I created 7 lessons, and these are all lessons that can be repeated throughout the year because they're all skills that kids need to know for reading. But one of the things that I think was really sort of an eye-opener for me was in creating this, trying to think about what kind of dispositions and attitudes are we trying to develop in our students. And I think for me, one of the biggest ones is a growth mindset. We want them to develop an attitude about mistakes, that you have to work hard, that if you make mistakes, it's part of learning, that while you're working independently, you're going to be frustrated, you have to work through it. So those are things that in this curriculum, I'm hoping that that will be a part of as I use it. And these are lessons that I'm planning on using with my students this year. Some of them are based on things I've already done, and as I said, things I've kind of learned about. So the actual lessons in their entirety are on my Weebly site, but one of the things that we're really looking at in this curriculum that I created is certainly under enduring understandings. Everyone can learn to read, and reading is a skill which is used for all subjects and all grades. And that's sort of the big idea, I guess. Even though these are a lot of little things put together, to me, the big idea is we want to create readers for lifetime. And we want them to love reading and not be afraid to make mistakes. We want to build their confidence and their reading stamina. So each lesson has a title, and each lesson has an objective and different materials that are used. There are links to the PDFs for certain worksheets and flashcards, which are on the site. I use some of the open court sounds like Pam the lamb, bouncing ball, and even just teaching the letter sounds to students. We as kindergarten teachers have found that people teach these incorrectly. So we actually spend a lot of time, even with kids who know all of their letter sounds, correcting them from saying "buh" and putting an "uh" sound on everything to saying "buh." And there's a big difference because we've had kids that put a U on everything because they're saying for each of the consonant sounds. So this is really a big one. Short vowel sounds are a huge part of this curriculum. They're in a lot of different lessons. Sight words, CVC words. Starfall.com is another site that I did a lot of looking at. They have a huge amount of lesson plans that are available for reading intervention and for phonemic awareness. And so I included it in my curriculum because I'm going to start showing my students how to use these websites. And that was one of the sort of another discovery that happened in this program, is that I realized that I can be using this stuff now, that my students can learn how to use this program and they can use it at home. Games like the letter game. And one of the things that teachers in kindergarten are teaching all the time is concepts of print. You know, these are such simple things, but these are big things for kids that don't know how to read. And in a child who is struggling in reading, some of these things are major concepts. And so there's a lot of emphasis on that throughout the curriculum. And teaching kids how to use Lexia and playing games like in Lesson 11 where they are matching cards to objects in the room. A lot of kinesthetic learning goes with these. And in Lesson 12 and 13, for kids that are ready for it, there's a game matching letter sounds to words with books and a game with student names. So one of the things they ask us to do is reflect on what we're learning and what we believe in and what we think we could do in the future. And so we obviously want our students to have positive outcomes. We want them to be, we want them to feel comfortable trying new things. And as teachers, I feel like the biggest sort of area of growth for me in this program was understanding that we have to constantly try new things to meet our students' needs. That what we did last year may not work, and what we're doing this year might be something new that could make a huge difference. Unfortunately, with every project comes limitations, and in this particular project, the big limitation was that I was completing this project in the summer. So a lot of the research elements of this project were done in earlier classes, and during the year I kept some of the data from the students that I was teaching so I could use some of it. But that was a limitation, lack of access to some of the things that I might have access to during the year. If this had happened during the year, I probably would have asked more of you for more input. And certainly during the summer, is a more limited duration of the project. So some of the limitations were a little challenging, but I still felt that I was able to accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. So there's been a lot of talk about acquiring 21st century skills, and certainly reading, I think, is one of them, where we want our kids to be able to use reading so they are able to learn all the things they need to learn to master those skills. And a big part of University of San Diego's philosophy has to do with social justice and equality and equal access to education. So many people believe that reading intervention programs are one of the best ways to close that gap. That if we can reach kids who are struggling early on, especially in some of the poor neighborhoods, they might be able to achieve more with reading. So this was a very valuable experience for me to create curriculum and to read research about reading intervention. And so, of course, the last part in terms of moving forward was I wanted to come up with some recommendations for further research on reading intervention and what I think would be important for reading intervention. And so I think it's important to establish assessment protocols early on so we can identify our struggling readers as early as possible, and to do very frequent assessments all year long, which is something a lot of teachers here do anyway, but I think it's a good way to keep track of what they're doing. And that's one of the things that Lexia does, is that it keeps track of the progress so specifically that you can tell how students doing. Monitoring their progress closely, to me, is the key, and certainly providing multiple learning opportunities. One of the big things that I also learned from this program was increasing student engagement is a key for kids to feel independent and excited about what they're learning, and certainly giving them more choice is a big part of it. So in everything I'm teaching now with reading, I'm thinking, how can I give my students more choice so they feel like they have more control over their learning and they're more engaged? And certainly modifying and adapting curriculum to meet needs for all students is extremely important, since all students are individuals. Let's This particular project really helped me to read a lot of research and study it in a new way. To sort of take multiple articles and put them together and compare them. And receiving feedback from my professors and colleagues at the University of San Diego was extremely helpful, because to be in the program you have to be a full-time teacher. So all the people in the program are working full-time, and we share a lot and we collaborate a lot together. It was very, very useful, and it really gave me a chance to reflect on myself as an educator and to identify areas of improvement for things that I can do when I'm teaching kids to read. I also want to be able to share with other teachers at my school and to be able to give them things that I've worked on so they can benefit from those things as well. And I'm going to close with I always say to the kids, readers are leaders, and that certainly seems very applicable today. But I want to instill a love of learning with students, and certainly reading skills are life skills, and they're used in all areas of life. But my three favorite quotes having to do with education are, "I touch the future, I teach," with Krista McAuliffe, first teacher in space. And great educator John Dewey said, "Education is a social process. Education is growth. Education is not a preparation for life, but it's life itself." And my favorite of all is Nelson Mandela, "Education is the most powerful weapon we can use to change the world." So this is my project, Capstone project, emsanders@weebly.com if you're interested in reading more about it. But I want to thank you for coming today. I've got references at the end, and that concludes the presentation. Thank you for coming. I really, really appreciate it. It meant a lot to me.